Welcome to another episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Our co-hosts, Sri Rajagopalan and Peter V.S. Bond, explore how brands and retailers engage with consumers online, in-store, and everywhere in between. And now, here are Sri and Peter.
Okay.
Welcome back, folks, to the CPG Guys. And I am Sri, one of the CPG Guys, focusing on everything D2C, retail media, supply chain, commercial, Walmart.com, you name it. And I'm one of those e-commerce guys, as said. I'd like to remind all our audience that you can find all our content at cpgguys.com, as well as you can tell us what you'd like to hear on the show. And there's one easy way to do that. Simply go to ratethispodcast.com/cpgguys and tell us exactly what you think about the show and leave us a rating. At the same time, we would like for you to know that the show is also shaped by you, for you. So you decide what the audience is, who comes on the show. So please do make sure to go and do that for us. I would also like to remind y'all that we ran a one question, one answer series to the most pressing as well as opportunity-based questions in the CPG industry and retail back in 2020 in November and in December. And we're happy to say we will be relaunching that back in March 2021. And in addition, we now have a fresh 4, which is the 4 most newsworthy articles of the week that my co-host Peter and I put up any episode you choose to listen to the podcast. So irrespective of what episode, when you choose to do it, and if you filter back to episode 20 or episode 40 perhaps, you still get to listen to the 4 newsworthy articles of that given week you're listening in. And now let's welcome my co-host, the man of consumer centricity, insights, retail, customer, consumer, the loyalty captain. Sometimes I call him the CRM guy, Mr. Bond. Hello.
Hey, Sri, how you doing? You are the Uber to my Drizzly, the DoorDash to my 7-Eleven, and the Ocado to my Kroger. Together, we get it done.
You're going to have to come up with new ones for when pitches and catches report.
Oh, we're very close, Sri. Don't worry, in a couple of weeks, I got you covered.
It's not even days. It's not even weeks. It's now hours. Now I'd like to welcome to the show a friend of ours, an expert on all things Far East and all things digital, and the man who corrected me once at a public keynote forum and called it Unified Commerce versus e-commerce. I'd love to welcome to the show a keynote speaker himself, Michael Zakkour. Could you tell us, for the purpose of the audience, what you do and who you are, Michael?
Hi, Sri. Hi, Peter. Thank you for having me on today. It's an honor and a pleasure. I run a company called 5 New Digital. We're primarily a consulting firm that works with brands, retailers, CPG companies, and manufacturers as they expand into the worlds of digital commerce, new retail, and unified commerce. Say probably 70% of our business is focused on North America and Europe, and roughly 30 to 40% of our business is focused on China and the Asia Pacific region. In short, I've got 25 years of experience in retail, digital commerce, e-commerce, international expansion. And, really what we do is we tie all the key pieces together that we consider crucial to any brand or company succeeding today. And that is, how do you integrate online, offline technology, content, and supply chain to build an ecosystem of products and services that make people want to come to you and stay with you for all their daily living needs?
For our audience, while we will be tempted to go back into the land of North America here, one of the primary reasons we requested Michael to join the show today is we could tap into his expertise on the Far East. I think it's common knowledge, or maybe Michael will help us bust the urban legend that what happens in APAC, especially in the Far East, China, Korea, and Japan, eventually makes its way to Western Europe and then finally to North America. So without further ado, let's get right into that and see if we can bust those myths or whether we confirm those are the truths. So obviously, Michael, your experience in China goes deep, over a decade and a half, close to 2 decades, when digital was still a phenomenon in the US. Consumers were adopting digital. and actually shopping online, browsing online, and doing all things online, and the trips were getting interrupted in a variety of online ways. What was the reason someone living in North America started working in the Far East, and what are like three high-level learnings you've got from the Far East that you'd kind of pass on to us here in North America? What would they be?
I first went to China almost 18 years ago, so it is coming up on 2 decades of my having lived and worked in China and the greater China area as well as APAC. I think what's interesting is, certainly North America, Europe, the rest of the world had a significant head start in establishing the pattern of consumption and behavior based around e-commerce and digital commerce. There really wasn't much e-commerce to speak of in China prior to 2005, 2006. As legend has it, in the late 90s, Jack Ma, who went on to found Alibaba, took a trip to visit a friend in Seattle. And it was the first time he actually saw the internet, sitting down in this guy's office, and went on Amazon and saw that you could buy things through the computer. And he felt like, wow, this is something that just doesn't exist in China yet. And I'd like to figure out a way to bring it there. And so the US in particular had a significant head start on the development of integrating digital tools and practices into retail and into consumption. But really starting in the mid 2000s and going forward, China in particular led the way in leapfrogging the US. So it's not a myth. Generally speaking, what's happening in China generally is 4 to 5 years ahead of what's happening here. So, if you really want to see what the future of retail looks like, what the future of digital commerce looks like, really all you need is a ticket to Shanghai and a week to walk around and experience what's happening there. Really, the key innovations in digital commerce over the last 5, 6, 7 years have all taken place in China. And so, that was the basis of a book I wrote last year called The New Retail, Born in China, Going Global. And that
For the purpose of our audience, Michael, if people wanted to find the book, do they just go to Amazon?
Yeah, you can find the book on Amazon or other online retailers.
We'll put a link to it in the liner notes of the podcast so people can find it easier.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and the purpose of the book was to really, for a Western audience, give them a peek behind the curtain to just how far advanced China is in particular, and Asia in general, in the integration of online and offline and creating new consumer experiences. And really the turning point came about 5 years ago when Jack Ma declared his intention to create something called the new retail. And in his mind, we were moving away from a world where we talked about channels and e-commerce and moving towards a world that's really made up of ecosystems and habitats. And that the goal should be more commerce, bigger commerce, better connected commerce, that, channels are in competition with each other when they shouldn't be. And so what he set about doing was creating the first fully realized ecosystem of products and services to create a 24/7, all-encompassing set of services and products that people could engage with from the time they woke up in the morning to the time they went to bed. And so what we've seen is really, in China, everything's connected. There's really no difference between walking into a physical store or shopping through your app or shopping through a website. Everything is fully connected to give the consumer one single frictionless experience that personalizes and customizes everything from search to exploration to peer recommendations to the actual buy.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm very honored to have gotten to know you over the last couple of months, and I'm so intrigued by what you have to say. Let's start back at the beginning, though, when you first interacted with Sri and you had the opportunity to correct his description. Maybe that's not the right word, but there are a lot of words to describe commerce.
It is the right word.
Okay. there are a lot of words to describe commerce that isn't entirely conducted in a physical store. Some people call it e-commerce. There's digital commerce. And then you've coined the phrase or used the phrase unified commerce. What's right? And can you give us a bit of an understanding from your perspective of what defines digital commerce, e-commerce, and what you're advocating, which is unified commerce?
Yeah, and to be honest, it was confusing to me for a couple of years because I found myself, depending on the place and the situation and the conversation, sometimes using the term digital commerce, sometimes using the term e-commerce, sometimes using the term unified commerce. And I think several years ago, even in my mind, I viewed them as somewhat interchangeable. But from the work we've been doing, in Asia, and as we've been bringing that work here to the United States, the big revelation to me is that they are three distinct things. And so we encourage brands and retailers to think about three levels of engagement. The first is digital commerce. And I think the biggest mistake people make is using digital commerce interchangeably with e-commerce, right? Digital commerce is the application of digital tools and technologies to solve real life analog business problems. And essentially what that means is the digitization of the entire operational and value chain of an organization. So digital commerce is how you digitize everything from product design, forecasting, predictive analysis, everything planning, right? And so if we look at the 6 mega processes of...
Fair to say the word digital commerce is therefore more internally focused and insular?
I don't think so. I don't know if it's insular so much as it's just not a concept that the vast majority of businesses are yet familiar with. I think a lot of companies are still operating in that bifurcated mindset of you have e-commerce and all things digital, and then you have the analog world and all things not digital. And what we're seeing is the companies that are succeeding today are applying digital solutions and digital tools to every aspect of their operation to solve problems and answer questions. Mm-hmm. So digital commerce is simply the digitization of planning, making, buying, storing, distributing, and selling every product and service. And so companies really need to start at that top level and say, how do we become a digital commerce company? How do we adapt to the fact that no matter how fast or slow we think we should be moving towards a digital direction, everybody else around us is moving there. And if we don't do it, we are going to be the square peg in the round hole, right?
Yep.
Then you take that second term, which is the new retail, okay? And the new retail is the integration of online, offline technology, content, and supply chain to build an ecosystem, And if we look today, there are probably 10 to 12 companies who are considered the mega ecosystem builders globally. So here in the US, we have Amazon, Walmart, Target, Apple, to a certain degree, emerging Facebook and Google, Home Depot, Lowe's. These are companies that are building these mega ecosystems, right?
What about Instacart? Would they qualify?
Great question. Actually, we just added Instacart and Shopify just in the last year onto our list of mega ecosystem builders. Okay. I think Shopify is far further along in the process of building an ecosystem, but the investments that they have made in supply chain and fulfillment has certainly taken them a long way towards that ecosystem. Okay.
I can say that for Shri and me, an important part of our ecosystem is Drizzly, but that's another story.
No, Peter, actually, I would like to ask that question to you, Michael. Like when you talk about ecosystems and connected commerce, unified commerce, what does the word Uber spur in your mind?
We break it down now.
Sorry, he had to bring up Drizzly. I had to ask Uber.
Right. Well, we can talk about your personal consumption habits maybe a little later in the conversation.
That would be
But
Peter's, not mine.
yeah, but for now, to try and answer the question more directly, we encourage people to think about their engagement with companies outside of their four walls in three ways. You have ecosystems, you have platforms, and you have habitats. And so every company needs to think about what is my offensive and defensive strategy for an ecosystem, a platform, and a habitat. So Amazon, Walmart, Target, Costco, these are ecosystems. What is your offensive and defensive strategy for the ecosystem? When we think about Uber, right now I still put Uber in the platform category, which is providing an environment for a certain number of services and products to be sold through in that platform. So if we think about Etsy as a platform for makers, we can think about Netflix as a platform for entertainment. Right now, Uber is a platform for transportation, whether that's personal transportation or delivery. And then finally, that third category is specific habitats. So a company's direct-to-consumer website is a habitat. A company's social commerce, right? Companies are really doing social commerce. I'm not talking about, promoting the brand through social media, but where you can actually click and buy in a single instance, through Instagram. So what are these habitats? There are a number of physical habitats and there's a number of digital habitats. So when I look at Uber right now, for me, they fall into that platform category.
Yep.
So when we move from digital commerce to new retail, then we say, okay, within that, there are ecosystems, platform, and habitats. This is what leads to the concept of unified commerce. And the best way to think about unified commerce is your opportunity to monetize the investment you made in building a digital commerce oriented company. And it's how you monetize the investment you're making in your offense and defensive strategies for ecosystems. And it's based around the idea that it doesn't matter where a consumer journey starts or ends. It doesn't matter where a lead is generated or where the sale is completed, right? It's the idea that we are actually just trying for bigger, better, more commerce. And that takes a significant leap in new thinking for any organization where you still have a lot of, at CPG companies, for instance, working in these extremely siloed environments and not quite getting the connection where, hey, if we're a CPG holding company and on one side of the ledger, we have, a number of products that go in or around the mouth, they're not talking to each other. We're not capturing that one consumer and pulling them across the entire organization. So it's how do you break down silos? How do you capture the consumer lifetime value, not just for a single brand, but across the organization? And then finally, unified commerce is basically mastering the how, right? We're in an environment now where the what can pretty much be anything. And the companies who master the how being digitization, technology, and data science, coupled with supply chain, logistics, and fulfillment, when you master those hows, you can virtually plug anything in to be your what and do well.
At the end of the day, Michael, I just feel that going where the consumer is going and following the consumer on their journey of finding a brand at the end of the day. But in support of what you just said about unified commerce, Michael, how important is this? We're in 2021. How important is this in a brand's journey? Is it like all virtually non-negotiable? And is this more relevant to like startups or larger brands, mid-scale brands? And could you also tell us a little bit about why in the US here brands need to adopt this approach of unified commerce versus all those other words we described up front, including e-commerce? And is there any example top of mind that will come to you where you see a brand doing this really well?
A funny thing has happened over the last few years. all the buzz around digital native brands and direct to consumer brands, right, has dominated the news, at least in our world, for the last 5 or 6 years. And the glowing headlines about the genius founders who found a way to beat the system, to start up a brand that bypassed wholesale, that bypassed retailers, that bypassed the traditional frictions and processes you would need to win shelf space at a Target or a Walmart. Well, if I can't beat P&G and J&J on the winning the shelf space game, then guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to skip the process direct completely and go direct to the consumer. And that created some really significant success stories. And, we all know, the key ones, Casper and Warby Parker and Harry's, and we can go right down the list, of all these great D2C brands. But a funny thing happened along the way over the last couple of years, which is a lot of these brands realized that they were never, ever going to scale enough to go from being $100 million company to $1 billion company based on that model. And the essence of that is the economics of e-commerce. And I'm probably going to offend some people here, but e-commerce is a crappy business model. If you really boil it down to its essence, there are very few companies in the world who can make a significant and sustainable profit selling products just direct to consumer through one or several habitats. So now what you've seen is these D2C natives are all getting into wholesale. They're opening stores. They're opening experience centers. Now you're seeing Harry's razors end caps at Walmart. Okay. Now, at the same time, the traditional CPG companies who've done magnificently, some of them for 80, 100, 150 years, on the model of build a great product, create a nice brand around it, manufacture it at scale, sell it at scale, right? What they have found out is that they can't make a living just doing that anymore. So this is the idea behind unified commerce, that it doesn't matter where you start or end the journey. You need to be fully integrated in all of these habitats, in all of these platforms, and all of these ecosystems to succeed. Okay?
What's clear is the three words: ecosystems, platforms, and habitats. But you made a profound statement there that I'd love to kind of reiterate for our audience as I pass on the next question to Peter, which is, you clearly stated, if you are born a native D2C brand, that ecosystem sustaining profit over the course of time is most likely unsustainable from a growth perspective. So Peter, next one for you, please.
One of the most frequent questions Shri and I get from brands thinking about going into this space, particularly around D2C, is the data aspect. So my question to you is, what about data and connecting with consumers on a first-party basis? How important is it for that one-to-one relationship, and what are the key outcomes that they could expect, data being one of them, and the application of that to make them successful?
Yeah. So the first thing to understand is I think there's often a misunderstanding there when we're talking about data, and in particular talking about data science, that many people have a very narrow focus on what that means, right? They concentrate heavily on the word data, but they don't put enough emphasis on the word science. It is science. There is a process, there is a methodology, there are theories, right? There is a process to the science of it. And data science includes a number of disciplines. It's predictive modeling, it's statistics, it's mathematics, it's data collection and analytics, it's artificial intelligence, it's machine learning, it's voice recognition. All of those things are data science. And I think there's too much of a focus on just collecting, analyzing, and attempting to put data to work for you. So first, I would say you have to take that much bigger picture of the data and the science and all the disciplines that make them up. That's number one. Number two, the whole goal of creating your data science program should be around helping you make good decisions, right? It's a decision-making tool, right? It's a decision-making tool. The
whole purpose of data is to get insights, or rather we call them informed decisions. You are correct.
Informed decisions, the right insights. And by the way, these can be decisions that go all the way back to what color shirt should we start producing. I think here, if you'll allow me, I think this is a good spot to give the key example of how Alibaba built the largest and best functioning unified commerce ecosystem in the world. Okay, this will really, hopefully, I think, bring it home for the listeners. Alibaba basically for many years was best known as China's largest e-commerce company, right? But the truth is, e-commerce is one small part of what Alibaba does, okay? Alibaba set out several years ago to power an entire ecosystem that could capture a consumer for every product and service they need in their life. And what they did was they said, well, at the center of this thing, we're going to call it new retail. But that should be interchangeable, and this is the key, with the term consumer centricity. Everything we do is for the consumer. So imagine, if you will, the sun at the center of this, the sun at the center of the universe is consumer centricity. And that is being powered by four key elements, right? It's being powered by supply chain and logistics, IT and data science, content and media, and all commercial interactions. And those can be B2C, B2B, or B2B2C. And those four power sources are what they use to put all that energy into consumer centricity, okay? The best example of how this works is the incredible and somewhat unexpected runaway success that Alibaba has had with what used to be called Hema, which they've rebranded as Fresh Hippo. Fresh Hippo is the perfect case study of the power of unified commerce. Essentially, what Alibaba did was they rolled out on the surface what looked like a new, modern, tech-driven grocery store. But that was really just the window dressing. It was all the things you couldn't see behind that grocery store that proved the theory of unified commerce to be right. And what do I mean by that? If you walk into a Fresh Hippo store, the first thing you're going to notice is your money is literally no good there. Cashless, only everything is app-based shopping, and everything is digital payments, okay? When you walk in, you notice immediately the store format is smaller. They keep less inventory on the shelves. They keep high turns, okay? Every single product in the store has a QR code, everything. Whether it's a stalk of asparagus or a piece of salmon, it has a QR code. Now, I'm a big seafood fan, so I gravitate towards their seafood section. Now, their seafood section is a little different than yours and I's at home. Why? Because they actually have 200 tanks full of fresh seafood. And all that seafood has a QR code. So I take my cell phone and I do the QR code on the Alaskan king crabs. And immediately I get something that comes up on my screen. It says, this crab was caught 250 miles off the coast of Alaska 49 hours ago. Wow. Here's the boat that caught it. Here's how the boat got to the port. Here's where the crab was put in a crate. It got on this plane. It flew to Shanghai. It landed at 2:44 a.m. and the truck brought it from the airport to our store by 4 p.m. Okay? I swipe left. If you like Alaskan king crab, it goes well with these side dishes, and you should also get some shrimp and scallops to go with it. Swipe left. Again, here are the wines and beers that pair well with it. Brilliant. Swipe left, et cetera, et cetera. So you get all this rich content. Then finally, when I want to make a decision to buy, it says to me, do you want this waiting for you at the store when you're done and you want to walk home with it? Or do you want us to deliver it to your house 30 minutes from now, 2 hours from now, or 4 days from now? By the way, that white wine that pairs well with it, I'm sorry, we don't stock it in this store, but Alibaba also has an investment in what's called the 1919 wine shops. That's a street level wine and liquor store. Well, that's easy. With one click, I go to Tmall Global. I add the wine to my cart. It gets put in the cart with my Alaskan king crab. And I look up, and there's a chain that comes out of the floor of the store. It circles the store with the bags, and everything that you ordered is getting dropped into a bag, and it disappears back into the floor on the other side of the store where there's a staging area, and all of that's put together. It's handed to a guy on a motorbike, and he goes out and he's going to deliver it to you when you want it. Okay. All of this is what's happening here. Let's look at behind the scenes. Every Fresh Hippo store is a forward operating base for logistics that puts every product you would want to buy on Tmall in the store or on Tmall Global 15 minutes from your house.
Wow.
Okay. It is connected to everything they sell on Tmall and Tmall Global. It's connected to the in-time department store. It's connected to the 1919 wine shops. So if you look at what Alibaba has really done, they've either outright bought or invested in 6 different types of physical retail outlets, connected it to all of their online outlets, and used the Fresh Hippo store as the centerpiece of all of that. That is unified commerce.
Now, can I just say to all of those aspiring entrepreneurs out there, if you can figure out how to grow QR codes on zucchini squash and Alaskan king crabs, wow, I think you have got something that is going to go well. I know that's a humorous approach, but Michael, that is just incredible. It is really incredible what that model has created.
Yeah, we haven't figured out how to actually, sequence the DNA to get the QR code to grow natively on the tail. But what we are doing, and, in all seriousness, is last year, I think beginning of 2019, I wrote an article that basically said the biggest import from China in 2020 would be the QR code.
One of the things, Michael, that's almost an automatic these days because of the pandemic is if you go to an outdoor dining restaurant or in other parts of the country where you can go indoors at a reduced capacity, menus have vanished. If you want to see what's on the menu, you scan the QR code. So it's arriving here fast.
Yeah. I was scanning my QR codes for menus in Shanghai 4 years ago. 4 years ago. So
that was my earlier point too. There are things that are going to come here, but it's going to make its way through literally from east to west, following the journey of geography.
Yeah. So like I said, in my 2019 prediction would be the year that QR codes finally arrived on the shores of the U.S. And now you're seeing smart companies adopting them everywhere. Now, simply putting up a QR code isn't enough, right? You have to have the right content and the right connection to your habitats and your platforms to make them work. But I mean, the QR code runs life in the East. I mean, they're on your table, they're on bus stops, they're on every product. But talk about the most powerful, for Peter, CRM guy, it's the most powerful CRM tool in the world.
You had me at hello, Michael. but before Shri gets to the last question, because I know we've been running the gamut here, I want to be a little more tactical on the habitats issue. So D2C versus going to Amazon. What does a brand need D2C? Why do they need it when there's Amazon? Why would they consider doing it? What are kind of the key attributes or value propositions of doing a D2C business? What is the kind of strengths that a brand would need to have in place to be successful in this and to actually need a D2C model?
Yeah.
We say Amazon, but the example you just gave us of Hippo and Alibaba, Like, why would somebody even want to experiment with D2C when you get that kind of an experience with Alibaba?
Or for that case, when I say Amazon, we have Walmart's marketplace, we have eBay, we have lots of different marketplaces. Why go D2C?
Okay, let me just pick up on what Shri said there. The big difference between Alibaba's Tmall and Amazon is that when you're working through Tmall, you are doing D2C. All Alibaba is doing is providing you the digital space to set up your own store. So it is D2C. It's your inventory, it's your store, it's your pricing, it's your content, it's your journey. They are simply providing you a space where the consumer knows nobody but the authentic brand could possibly be selling in this space.
That's great.
So Tmall is D2C. Now, what you can do with Alibaba is you have the choice, you have the ability to integrate all of these habitats. So you can do your store on Tmall, you can place your product in the Fresh Hippo stores, you can place your product in the 1919 wine shops, you can do a store within a store in their in-time department stores. So it is all D2C. Whereas Amazon, okay, to answer the question, why do D2C when you have Amazon? For me, Amazon should be treated as it's a retailer. You can talk to me all day about the differences between 1P and 3P. At the end of the day, and I talk about this with my clients all the time, when you end up crunching all the numbers, the economics of selling wholesale to Walmart and selling a product through Amazon come out to be almost exactly the same. Right? So you don't own the consumer relationship through Amazon. You don't own any data. You don't own the narrative. Listen, I'm not an Amazon basher. Amazon's great. Amazon has done amazing things for the industry, and they've been a leader in so many ways. But they have to be considered. So I don't even consider Amazon a marketplace anymore. Right. So when we talk about habitats, right, I actually separate Amazon is its own habitat now. Mm-hmm. So you have the Amazon habitat.
Habitat or ecosystem or a combination of both?
Well, Amazon is both. So there is the Amazon ecosystem, which includes the 172 companies they either own outright or invested in or partnered with. That's the ecosystem. But if we're talking about Amazon.com, right, itself, the place we're actually going to buy stuff, that itself is a habitat. And it's its own separate habitat. So when we talk about habitats, there's Amazon, there's marketplaces, there's third-party general, Walmart.com, there's third-party specialty, Chewy.com. But the one that's really coming that, I know we're running on time here, that I want everybody to think about, you're saying what's coming next from east to west. The two that people have to pay attention to, number one is the power of live streaming. We are only just scratching the surface of what's possible with live streaming in the US. $2 trillion worth of merchandise was sold in China through live streaming last year. China's two most popular live streamers sold $6 billion worth of merchandise in an hour and a half of live streaming at the start of last year's 11/11. So there are chances for brands to look at D2C. And by the way, this is also an important point. When a lot of companies are thinking about D2C, they're thinking only about setting up a D2C website. They're not counting live streaming as D2C. They're not counting browsing commerce and what Google and Facebook are doing in marketplaces. There are actually 4 or 5 key D2C habitats that when combined, you will turn people's heads by making them realize 20 to 25% of their business in 2 years could be D2C, not just the 3% or 4% they think it is just about selling through a website. So live streaming, QR codes, and then browsing-based shopping as opposed to buying. These are all going to be big in the next year. And I think the parallel I would make is the key to the success of the D2C native brands 5 or 6 years ago is they cracked the formula on performance marketing before people realized it was a thing. And so you had all of this low-hanging fruit that they were able to go out and leverage Facebook and social media to turn the investments in those platforms into sales. But what's happened is the industry has reversed itself. Everybody's caught on to it. And performance-based marketing on its own is far too expensive to be sustainable. So what are the things you can do now to be the same guy, in that position they were on 5 years ago? Is look at live streaming, look at QR codes, look at integrating your habitats. And finally, the answer to D2C is the future is consumer centricity, and you cannot own consumer centricity without a mix of D2C habitats and methodologies. Period. Full stop. End of story.
Michael, that was going to be my next question, but I think you already answered it in terms of if there were a couple big learnings, and you clearly talked through live streaming as the first and most important thing that's emerging, especially as you noticed over $6.5 billion of sales on 11/11. For those who don't know, 11/11 is a key shopper marketing moment on Alibaba, sort of like Prime Day here in the United States on Amazon, except the scale is 100x larger in terms of size. Like many companies do, like over 50% of their entire annual business on that one day alone. So to be noted. In China, they also call it Singles Day, and a huge opportunity for brands to kind of do different packaging and test new innovation and just ideation, etc. But I'd like to remind our audience you can find all our content at cpgguys.com. And do tell us what you think about the show and what you want to hear from Peter and me and what kind of guests you'd like on the show. Easy way to do it, ratethispodcast.com/CPGguys. This quarter was all about founders and sharing their wisdom and knowledge with us. And I want to thank Michael for your kindness and generosity of sharing everything about the China market, Japan, Korea, and the Far East. If people want to find you, Michael, and follow up with you, what's the best way they can do that?
I'm a big fan of direct contact. I don't stand on ceremony. I have a very open door. So the first place they can start is simply writing me an email, michael@5newdigital.com. So that's the number 5newdigital.com. They can find me on LinkedIn. I also love to engage with people on Twitter @Michael Zakkour. So yeah, and if they're interested in the books, the first book was China's Super Consumers, which came out 5 years ago. And my most recent book is The New Retail, Born in China, Going Global. Both of those can be found on Amazon. And yeah, like I said, open door. Love to chat and learn with people from all walks of the industry. So feel free to contact me.
Thank you, Michael. Peter, as always, it's a pleasure doing these week over week with you.
This was terrific, Shri. And Michael, I'm just going to warn you about the followers of the CPG guys. You could be in for a big tweet storm. You threw it out there. Just be ready. But in any event, this was phenomenal. Another great educational episode where we got down to the strategies and tactics and educated our audience about what's going on and where unified commerce is going. So, Michael, thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, gentlemen. A pleasure as always.
Folks, thank you for listening in. We'll be back soon with another episode of the CPG Guys. Until then, make the most of the day ahead of you.
The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys LLC or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPG Guys LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPG Guys LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPG Guys LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.